Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know I sound like a broken record, but I've had two consistent concerns with the action in Afghanistan, and I want to ask you each one a specific question about each of these things. One, of course, being with what was supposed to have been done before we would have a withdrawal, and the other having to do with a concern for our coalition forces and their safety. So on the first one, I think you all are very familiar with the document of February 29th, 2020. That was the U.S. Taliban agreement established a conditions-based approach drawing down troops in Afghanistan. According to this agreement, the Taliban was supposed to take certain steps against terrorist groups and participate in intra-Afghan dialogue on the country's political future. Now, what I'd like to ask each one of you to briefly respond to, in your assessment, what areas has this agreement come to? What's behind us now? What successes have we had? And which conditions have been met and which ones have not been met from that agreement in February 29th of 2020? Let's start with you, Mr. Secretary.
Senator, thank you for that question. I would say right up front that the Taliban's compliance with the agreement has been uneven over time. And I think in terms of areas that we have seen a follow through or success, they did comply with their agreement not to conduct attacks against the U.S. or coalition forces following the signing of the agreement, and that is largely held, with some very minor exceptions. So I think in terms of the attacks against U.S. and coalition forces, they complied with that. As I've testified publicly and said publicly previously, however, their violence against the Afghan forces and the Afghan people remained very high throughout this period. Okay. With respect to the entering into inter-Afghan negotiations, they did do that. And last September, they began discussions with the Afghan government on future peace arrangements. Those discussions have not been fruitful, but they did begin.
Okay. That's fine. We're running out of time here. General, do you generally agree with the comments or the answer that was given by the Secretary?
Senator, I do agree, and would just offer that, as Mr. Helvey mentioned, since that agreement was signed, the Taliban has not targeted the U.S. Or coalition forces.
I think that's kind of a mixed answer. I understand it. I appreciate it. But I don't think we've met the conditions that we talked about. And, of course, this is a different administration. Now, the second area that I've been concerned about for a long period of time came from a number of articles and awareness that's out there. We've seen, and one of them was that I actually had talked about, was found in the USA Today, May 10th. Now, in this thing, they talked about what's going to happen with our allies, people who stood by us, and if we withdraw in a manner that they're talking about. And such things in the article say, quote, that you will see the dead bodies in every street, and where he said he's already being tracked by the Taliban. They will slaughter us. They're in a panic right now because there's been such a backlog of these visas. It goes on, and I do want to ask at this point in the record, Mr. Chairman, that this be a part of the record. And
without exception.
So I'd like to know from each one of you what has happened. What have we been doing? What are we doing now to try to, assuming that these problems are very real, and I don't think anyone's going to deny that they are, that we can help our allies for the great job they have done for us. And I'd like to have each of you respond. Let's start with you on this one, General. What can we do right now to minimize that event?
Senator, we continue to coordinate very closely with our coalition partners. We went into this together. We've adjusted over the years together, and we're coming out together, and we continue to work together to do our best to support the ANDSF and the government of Afghanistan.
You say we're coming out together.
That's correct.
Okay, that, to me, that makes that even worse. What do you think, Mr. Secretary?
Senator, thank you for that question. And I agree with you. We have a moral obligation to help those that have helped us over the past 20 years of our presence and work in Afghanistan. We are working very closely with our State Department interagency colleagues to look at programs like the Special Immigrant Visa Program. However, as you know, that program in and of itself is limited.
Yes.
We'd like to be able to work with Congress to be able to increase the quotas and the resources for special immigrant visas. But there are certain categories of our Afghan partners that wouldn't meet the thresholds for special immigrant visas. So we need to look at other tools and other mechanisms to help those that have helped us, whether that's significant public benefit or humanitarian parole or other types of mechanisms that we can use to facilitate this. And we are working within the interagency to be able to identify those and get the proper resources attached to them. With respect to special immigrant visas, we're working very closely with State Department to identify and provide data that can help to provide the identification and the identities of those employees of the Department of Defense that would qualify. We're also looking at biometric data, which can also help to provide information and insight on who may qualify for that type of benefit.
Okay,
But that's
okay. Well, my time has expired, but I don't get a lot of comfort out of those answers. I'm very much concerned about those. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.